What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. Yesterday, reports started to blow up online for Pokemon Day, an announcement next week that would bring some of the classic titles up to the current Nintendo platform. This is something that people ask for all the time, every single year actually going into the event, but now things are getting pretty loud. There's a lot of smoke here. I'm going to go over exactly what's happening here today. Also, we are going to be talking about Highguard because, probably surprising no one, they have announced layoffs, and the future for that game looks very, very uncertain right now. And we have that Sony State of Play later on today, and there's rumblings now going around that one of those key announcements from Sony could actually bring a long-standing figure from the PlayStation family to other platforms, that being the Switch 2. We'll go over that and more. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button. Helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawnwave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And of course, members for the channel do get Newswave early. If you would like to learn more about that, click the join button or link in the description down below. And we're going to start today with the highest rated game of the year so far, and that's Mewgenics, which is a game that kind of came out of nowhere for me, although there are many people who have been following along here, as it's from the creator of Binding of Isaac. And like you can see over on Metacritic, currently sitting at an 89, that is leading the way, as I mentioned, for highest rated games of the year. And it does appear that they've already made back their budget in 3 hours. That happened. I mean, it just came out a couple days ago, and in fact, it's already crossed 250,000 copies. This from the creator, who was sort of posting about this on social media as they went along, almost in real time. And I mean, it's great. We see so many stories, as we're going to talk about soon, with something like Highguard that comes out and just completely sputters along right out of the gate, really. But here comes Mewgenics, smaller game, a indie-style game, and it's finding tremendous success. So again, it's good to point out these kind of stories as well to kind of balance out the Highguard stories of the world. Also, it looks like the Wii is going to be getting a new game for 2026. The Wii. The system came out in 2006. Yeah, so 20 years later, we have this title. You can see this over on Nintendo Everything, Metal Canary. Now, it does appear this game will be physical on the Wii, as you would expect, since you need a disc to pop into the system. But it will also be on Steam, and it sounds like they're going to try to get it to the Dreamcast. So I do like these fun retro pushes where you get a new physical copy to pop into your old, at this time, retro system. The Wii will be 20 years old later on this year. But it's a top-down shoot-'em-up style game, which is fine, but it's a fun marketing tactic to say, you know what, we can put it on Steam, but if we also make a Wii version, and then we make a Dreamcast version, and we start putting them out there, it does make headlines. Like, it works. So I like that aspect to it, but also just, it's fun to get a new Wii game. So I don't know, maybe I'll look into it. Should I try to pick this up and we can unbox it and check it out here on the channel? Let me know. Oh, and we've talked a lot about Assassin's Creed Black Flag Resynced, the remake of Black Flag, because it's like the worst kept secret, I feel like, in gaming right now. And, well, it's getting worse then for Ubisoft if they are trying to hold this reveal off any longer, because you can see, I mean, this is over on Amazon, Wario64 pointed it out, saying that the remastered art book for Black Flag is out there for Assassin's Creed. Very weird. It's a pre-order up now, and the release date is March 24th, 2026. I mean, hey, look, I guess there is a State of Play later on. I'm sure we could have Assassin's Creed, the Black Flag Resynced game in there. This isn't the first time, by the way, that games for Assassin's Creed have been leaked through merchandise. Different shirts have gotten out there. I think that was for Assassin's Creed Origins, if I'm not mistaken. So this is a status quo almost for Assassin's Creed. But I mean, like, Ubisoft, can we get the show on the road for Assassin's Creed Black Flag Resynced? Because this is one of the games that I'm looking forward to from them. It's like that and Splinter Cell, two remakes of older games from, well, better times for Ubisoft at this point. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with Pokemon, specifically old Pokemon games for people like me. I mean, if you're in your 30s, you're gonna hear about these games and go, oh yeah, those were the good days. Coming home from school and watching Toonami and playing Pokemon Red or Blue on the Game Boy Color. Well, here it'd be Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green, but, you know, still remakes of the older good days. And now we're doing a remake of a remake, I guess, or a re-release or port of that remake. And you can see here, this is over on My Nintendo News, saying leaker claims Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green to return on eShop with home compatibility. I think that aspect is kind of interesting. Home, of course, letting you transfer Pokemon out of one generation or version of the game to another one. So these would actually have quite a bit of value then, I figure, in like the competition space. But so we can see this is coming from a number of different sources here. It seems like Riddler Coup was the originating source here, as they put this out on social media, and it accrued more than 4 million views. So there's a lot of discussion around this, a lot of excitement, sure, but also a lot of confusion as to what exactly this would be. So it's not something that would go on Nintendo Switch Online. That's first and foremost. This would be something that would be sold separately, and you know what? I will admit that makes me think that this would be a real thing, because while they could just put the Game Boy Advance games in NSO, they also know that they would print money immediately when they announce and then release these. And compared to having to design a game from the ground up, and here just doing like a remake that most likely, or even a port, could just be like outsourced to another company to do the majority of the work, it's just a lot of money could just be made overnight for this. All right, so these would be, I guess, ports over to the Switch and the Switch 2, or just the Switch and then backwards compatible on the Switch 2. Necro Felipe did a very good rundown here of the different games. Individual sales of the games not part of NSO. No information right now when it comes to physical media. I would like to see, so let's say they do something like Nintendo did with Mario Galaxy 1 and 2, where they combine them on a single package that they release to retail stores, and then they just sell them separately on the eShop. And that's when it comes down to the pricing for these. So there's a lot of pricing speculation, clearly. $20, $30, those have been things that have been mentioned. And I mean, it would make sense for them to go, you know what? You guys been asking for these. They're $30. What are you going to do? And people would go, you know what? I'll take it. Look, I've seen the Pokemon fans who would come into retail stores when we were running stores, and they would plop down $100 some odd and buy 3 copies of the new Pokemon game for the family, and they would just leave. So it's spending money isn't new to the Pokemon fan base, especially if you look at the trading card side with the booster box and all. $30 like a drop in the bucket then for them, but I guess they'd want both games, then it's $60. I do think the Pokemon Company will test the limits, we'll say, for pricing around these games, but I am really curious to see how far they take it. I mean, if these are ports, you figure they would be able to do more than, hey, let's just run it through an emulator. They could do things like upscaling, maybe change up some of the visuals so it fits better on a larger display. Maybe the Switch 2 does have some sort of enhancement to it for 4K and a higher frame rate, I guess, but like, how much higher does the frame rate really need to be for a game that's based on, at this time, a Game Boy Advance title that was based on a Game Boy title? Still, though, I'm going to be keeping an eye out for this, because, look, 30th anniversary for Pokemon, it makes sense to do something that calls back to, like, the old days of Pokemon. And yes, going back to Kanto, that's always a whole meme and a joke. It's like, of course, it's something Kanto related. Yeah, of course, something Kanto related. It's the 30th anniversary of Pokemon. Go back to where it started. So I'll be keeping an eye out for this one, and I'm really hoping, because I would like to play some of these games again in, I guess, a release that would be more relevant to the current run of Pokemon games with home support. Next up, let's talk about something to keep an eye out for as we go into the state of play later on today, and that's that 2.5D God of War that's been rumored for quite some time, and I really hope it gets announced here, because it's been discussed for months now, and I'm just ready to see the thing. But there's an extra wrinkle being thrown in just ahead of Sony's event that certainly has people going back and forth online. So you can see, this is over on Tech4Gamers. It says, rumored God of War Metroidvania game could be multi-platform. First game in the series to skip exclusivity at launch. All right, so where is this coming from? Well, apparently it's from Nash Weedle, and so normally I look at these and I go, okay, and I just keep moving. The thing that gives me some pause about this one, it's not the first time I've heard the idea of this being a Switch 2 game be floated. I've mentioned the idea of Sony maybe exploring the Switch 2 or Nintendo's platform a bit with some of their older games, like Horizon Zero Dawn. Put that there, let people experience the Horizon franchise for the first time, and then maybe they seek out the other Horizon games and they realize, okay, I gotta buy a PlayStation 5 or eventually a PlayStation 6 to do that. This is interesting because it would be a new game, brand new title, And it would be Kratos. So God of War, major franchise for Sony. I mean, a storied franchise back to the PlayStation 2. So Kratos going over to the Switch 2 is, that would make some headlines. And so here's the thing. I've heard this before. This isn't the first time. And that's why I raised some eyebrows immediately. So I was like, really? Okay, that's interesting. Well, Nate was also questioned about this. And of course, he answered over on Twitter X. He says, all I can say is this: when talk of the 2D God of War was first started last year, I heard whispers that it was being considered for a multi-platform release. Whether that consideration evolved into an active plan, I don't know. So I heard months ago that Switch 2 was at least on the table for it. My only issue here, and this is where I think some people get into trouble when they get information, is it could be older information, or because it's in development, it's very much in flux, and maybe it doesn't get to the final big reveal. So they could be experimenting the idea of it being on the Switch 2. Or even the Switch 1, I don't know, I have to see on that. But they could be experimenting on it being on, say, the Switch 2. And in development, they have plans for it. But then as they get months out from release or a month out from the reveal that then leads to the marketing and the big push for its release, they end up just scrapping plans, at least for launch. Not that it couldn't come later, but they go, you know what? It's just going to be PlayStation 5 for now. Or it's just going to be PlayStation 5 and PC. And by the way, that could also be an interesting thing, even if it's not Switch 2, if it's PS5 and PC. I mean, we know Sony was mostly looking towards doing just multiplayer releases on PC and PlayStation 5 and even kind of Xbox through Marathon, but that was sort of in development before. But I get the idea. They were mostly looking at multiplayer, not single player. So that'd be some interesting data for then Sony to be able to collect for a game that's not the big 3D God of War game, but still a new entry in the franchise that I'm sure will have a lot of relevance when it comes to the lore and the story for God of War. So if that Switch 2 logo ends up going out in a press release, I don't think it's something, I don't know, they've put PC in their state of plays before, so I guess it's possible. I don't think they're going to show the Switch 2 logo during the state of play. It would be something that would maybe go out in a press release after the show, and then everyone reads it and goes, oh, wow, really? That's what Sony's doing. But at least for now, but we got to kind of wait and see with this state of play. So go into at least with that in mind, but I don't know if I would necessarily expect to see the Switch 2 logo next to God of War during that state of play. We'll have to check the fine print afterwards. Next up, let's talk about Highguard, as a bunch of layoffs were apparently happening yesterday. And I say apparently because we were learning through LinkedIn after people were going to the platform and saying, hey, I got laid off and I was working on Highguard. That's typically how this works. And then eventually we get a statement, sometimes days later, from the studio. Well, it didn't take days, it took a couple hours. Now, we can see this started here. This is over on VGC, saying a designer has claimed that most of the team behind free-to-play shooter Highguard has been laid off weeks after it launched. That's from Alex Grainer, so the designer who worked on Apex Legends and Battlefield 6, made the claim in a LinkedIn post on Wednesday. And as I mentioned, a few hours later, we have the studio behind it, Wildlight Entertainment, saying today we made an incredibly difficult decision to part ways with a number of our team members while keeping a core group of developers to continue innovating on and supporting the game. We're proud of the team, talent, and the product we've created together. We're also grateful for players who gave the game a shot and those who continue to be a part of our community. Now, when I hear core group of developers or a smaller team, I do think about a game that certainly had lofty expectations and high hopes, maybe refining themselves or even winding down a bit because it just hasn't hit the mark. Now, when they first released the thing, it was almost at 100,000 current players on Steam, and I bet you they looked at that and said, okay, we're good, we're going to be fine. But then hours later, it cut down. They lost half of their players, and now if you look on Steam, it's 3,000 players. So yeah, to drop that, I mean, really, you drop 97% of your player base in a couple of weeks. Now, they are also on consoles with Xbox and PlayStation, but even if you just assume they were the same, it's still less than 10,000 people across the board, all platforms that it's on, as a free-to-play game, not a paid game. That's concerning and makes sense why they would go, you know what, we don't really need this team size because we can't necessarily afford it. And then that does make people wonder, what's the future of Highguard? Because then I necessarily don't want to invest time or money into the game. It's a cascading effect that completely works against live service games because it's very difficult for them to ever make a comeback after a bad first impression. And I think that is going to be a talking point for this after what happened at the Game Awards. Now, I don't know if it would have had the surge that it did at launch, unless Jeff Keighley had done the whole thing at the Game Awards, and also doubled down, saying he'll accept people's apologies. Probably shouldn't have made that tweet at this time looking at the whole thing. But still, it definitely wouldn't have gotten, I think, as much pushback, and maybe could have hung around with a decent enough player base until they figured things out. They could still, I guess, make some changes and stuff and make it, it's possible they can make a comeback. Is it likely? Probably not. Again, a lot of people being laid off there, going to a smaller core group. Seems like something they're just gonna, I guess, fiddle around with, see if something can come out of it, but most likely we'll hear about how it's shutting down, a month or two from now, and that's the live service game. You take big swings and hope that you hit a home run first time at the plate, and most of the time you see a curveball and go, I'll get him next time, and then you just never come back around in the lineup. So there we go. Highguard, not looking great for its future. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about Pokopia, as it's a very strange looking game for a Pokemon spinoff, but leading up to its release, there were a bunch of previews that went live yesterday, as many people in the press and media were able to go out and play this game for about an hour and a half on location, and there were many different places that did. I'll leave some links down below to different previews, as well as IGN, who was able to interview some of the people behind Pokopia, specifically the director for it. Now, starting from the top here, the game itself is out March 5th, all right, so we're less than a month away from it, and it's definitely a mix of Pokemon, Dragon Quest Builders, and Animal Crossing. Now, the first hour that the press got to play, it was at the beginning of the game. So you kind of see the intro of it, the start, and then they jumped everyone ahead later in the game where they had about 30 minutes to just kind of play around with some of the, I guess, the later mechanics and stuff that they get in the game. Now, you do copy Pokemon abilities, and that lets you modify the world around you. So they showed like Water Gun from Squirtle. All of a sudden, you're regrowing grass, you're growing crops, and kind of a little bit of a farming game in there too, but it's like very much a mix of games that turns into kind of a life sim Pokemon style. And it's interesting to think that right now Nintendo could have Animal Crossing, Tamagotchi Life, and this Pokopia game all running alongside of each other within a few months, with Animal Crossing in that recent update. So a lot of life sim sort of games here. Apparently the game takes anywhere from, wide range by the way, 20 to 40 hours to complete. It seems to come down to how much time you want to take, I guess, just wasting time. I mean, look, maybe you get really into one aspect of the game and it's like, oh, I want to clear out everything. I want to have crops over here. I want to decorate over here. And then another person goes, I just want to mainline this thing and do as little as possible when it comes to the farming side or making everything look really, really nice. So again, it comes down to how you approach it. But I will say this, I'm interested in the story because it's dressed up almost as a mystery as to what happened to not only Ditto's trainer, you're playing as Ditto's trying to look like a human, but also just all humans in Pokemon, as they haven't seen any of them in a long time. So is this post-apocalyptic? Is just one small section of the world that's like, that's just walled off from civilization? I don't know. So that's the thing. Maybe I'll just be curious to see what people's take is, maybe on the end of the game when they do a big reveal or something. But you won't have to wait too much longer. It's out here in a few weeks. I do think this game is going to be bigger than what we were thinking it would be originally. And I think it's just when it was shown, it just was super weird looking. And the fact that they'd be able to tap into maybe the Animal Crossing side, maybe they tap in a bit to the Minecraft side, and then Pokemon. I still don't think it's necessarily a game that I would really enjoy that much. It's not really a game built for me, but I can see how many people would stream the game and have a good time, or just play it casually. And that's kind of what they're looking for with Pokemon, a casual audience that is massive, tap into that mainstream. And I think this can, provided a lot of the mechanics and the controls are more streamlined and don't get overly complicated. But hey, we'll probably find out with reviews here in a few weeks ahead of its March 5th release. And before we go to the comment of the day, we'll take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I ask, when Pokemon released back in the 90s, which version did you play? Now, I was trying to figure out how to word this well because back then people did have both. They had Yellow, despite Red and Blue being the originals. I mean, Yellow didn't come out till, a couple years later or something. And that one cheated a little bit because you could get all the starters without having to trade. That was a big thing, was, hey, you need to find somebody else who has another copy of the game so you can trade back and forth. But Yellow, they just handed them to you. Didn't have to work for it. Didn't have to buy all the accessories and give the Pokemon company more money. Anyway, Pokemon Red led the way here at 41%, then Blue at 30%, then Yellow. That's pretty strong from Yellow, considering it came, again, years later. And look, it did have Pikachu on the front. Obviously, big jump for marketing there to have Pikachu there. But red and blue, I had blue back then, so I'm a little surprised with red. I mean, I guess it had Charizard on the front, and it was Pikachu and Charizard. Those were like the two most popular Pokemon next to Mewtwo. Mewtwo was it back then. It's like, hey, you either get Mewtwo or you get missing number. Otherwise, you got nothing. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Locke, who says, due to General Direct right after the partner showcase is only logical. The only question is if it's going to be next week or beginning of March. I think it makes more sense for a Direct to happen, a general one, either end of March or beginning or second week of April. That's sort of what I'm thinking right now. Doesn't make sense for beginning of March. The reason I say that is because there's Mario Day, and I do believe Nintendo's going to treat that as a place to maybe announce that big 3D Mario game. I think it will be kind of a mini Direct almost, just with course being centered around Mario. So I'm thinking they space things out a little more and they get into April with the Direct. You also have to remember right now, Nintendo, they're leveraging third parties more than ever. I mean, they are getting day one releases from some of these big third party publishers that last generation they would have had to sit out completely or wait even years for them to eventually move the game over to the Switch 1. So that's something else you have to remember with Nintendo. They're navigating this third party landscape here a bit differently. So yes, they will make room for something like Resident Evil Requiem and space out some of their reveals going forward. So that's kind of where I am, okay? We have this state of play today for Sony. Next week or 2 weeks from now, we have Pokemon Day. That'll be a big event. And then I'm thinking March, Mario Day, some kind of small mini general or mini Direct. And then a few weeks later into April, big general Direct to work to set up the rest of 2026. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. If you missed yesterday's Newswave, I'll leave it up here in a card. Or maybe you want to check out some of the predictions for Sony's State of Play happening later on today. I did a whole video diving into that, and I'll leave it right below. Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.